Dobro jutro, dobar dan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have enjoyed the inspiring opening of today's summit. So we are just getting started, and the discussions ahead promise to be equally engaging. Before we kick off, I have just one really kind but important request. To allow enough space for networking later in the day, I ask all the speakers to keep to the schedule. Looks like everybody is happy with that, so I will take this as agreed. So let's turn to our executive roundtable now, where high-level representatives will reflect on how to align EU policy visions with the operational needs of TSOs, DSOs, and other stakeholders. Please welcome to the stage Seršen, State Secretary of Energy in the Ministry of the Environment, Climate and Energy, Government of Republic of Slovenia. Good morning, it is great to see you. Please take a seat. I'd just like to share with you that Mrs. Seršen has been instrumental in shaping Slovenia's climate and energy policies. So it's really great to have you here with us today. Please welcome Mr. Martin Magáth, CEO of SEPS, the Slovak Transmission System Operator. Good morning and welcome. Under his leadership, SEPS is playing a key role in regional market integration and strengthening Slovakia's electricity infrastructure. How are you? Okay? Happy to have you here with us. Please welcome Peter Vermaat, the Secretary General of the EU DSO entity, which unites over 900 European distribution system operators. Good morning. One little detail I have about Mr. Vermaat, he's dedicated to giving DSOs a stronger voice in Brussels, and that's why he's joining us in Ljubljana as well. Great to have you here with us. And our final panelist for this executive roundtable, Mr. Ivan Bulatović, CEO of Elektroprivreda Crne Gore, Montenegro's electric power company. Mr. Bulatović, I'm sure that many of you know him, is a driving force behind country's energy transition with a strong emphasis on regional energy cooperation. Good morning and welcome. And it's a huge pleasure to introduce also the moderator of this executive roundtable, my colleague Frédéric, a seasoned journalist and analyst who has spent years covering Europe's energy and climate policies. His sharp questions, be ready panelists, and broad perspective will set the stage for a thought-provoking debate. Here you go.
Okay, this should be working now. So sharp questions, no pressure. Just let me, before we start, make a brief remark for the audience. Actually, I'm trying to open up the discussion to the audience, so towards the end of the conference, I'll try and reserve about 10 minutes for your questions. So just raise your hand, there will be microphones circulating in the room. Okay, so just to get started, I'll start with you, Seršen. A question about the energy crisis. We've seen in 2022 gas, electricity prices going through the roof. Prices haven't yet gone down to pre-war levels. In terms of the response that you've seen from the European Union, maybe from some of your colleagues around Europe, what has been the most significant response that you've seen? Did you see, for example, a growing realization that electrification of end users is becoming even more urgent now with the energy crisis?
Yes, of course. What is to basically commend is that the European Union has managed to react. It has managed to stick together, to show unity, and it has delivered a response that was sufficient, and at least, it had some results. We are seeing them live now as we speak. in 2022 crisis. What Europe hasn't managed, or what we haven't managed as the society, as politicians, or even, well, the spheres that are connected to the politics, is that we lost the perception war on who is to blame for the high energy prices. So this has been reflected throughout the years now. Everybody thinks that the renewables are to blame, but in fact it was our high import dependency, and that still remains high, and from other sources though, but we are still very much import dependent. So what we need to do now is to really keep on explaining. We are still fighting that perception war, I think. It's still strongly present everywhere or throughout Europe. We need to fight that. On the other hand, where the European Union has made a move in contributing to this fight, the most significant that I see is to, I will put that very bluntly, to start putting more money on the table when it comes to mitigating the effects. So, for example, I mean, I can really, one example that I think of immediately is this year's cohesion regulation, for example, that has recognized that the member states can put more money into the grids, because there are the essential part now missing. We have seen really high penetration of renewables in the last years, and that was more than what was projected, what was expected. And now we have to deal with this, going back to the final consumers. And what we are seeing now that the European Union has made the move is to put the money to the member states to upgrade the grids internally and also on cross-border. So in that perspective, the European Union has delivered its part of the mosaic, I will say, to mitigate the high energy prices.
And did you see this shift as well? The emphasis going increasingly on electrification by opposition to gas. There was always this discussion between molecules and electrons. Have electrons kind of won this?
Yeah, in the long run, I think they have. I think that molecules will probably stay in our life for the next 30 years to come, perhaps even longer. But I think that we now understand that electricity is the story of the future, and that we have to really start working on this. And not just the penetration of the renewables, where there was too much focus maybe in the last years, but also the upgrade of the grids. And not just cross-border, this is still the missing link, to upgrade the internal, the distribution level, and to use the technologies for the internal grid to stay stable, to deliver, and then we come to the, of course, cross-border trading and everything else that is connected.
Yeah. Good, yes, indeed, a lot of pressure on DSOs. We'll come to that in a few minutes. Turning to you, Martin Magáth. Would you agree that the war in Ukraine has, provoked a sort of shift in perception towards electrification being sort of the long game, the answer? And did you see in Slovakia, for example, a big rise in connection requests since the 2022 crisis?
Yes, definitely. From the perspective of the TSO operator, so we see regarding the consumption compared with the previous years, there's a slight increase in consumption. So that could indicate that many companies have decided to electrify more their production sites, households, again, leaving the gas heating and replacing with heat pumps and stuff like that. So we as a system operator, we need to get prepared for this. So what we do right now is that we prepare projects which should support the connections, which should support the usage of the electricity, of the current existing capacity of the network, to be able to connect the customers. In our case, in the case of Slovakia, we as a transmission system operator, we mainly serve the distribution system operators. So we have only a few large customers connected directly to the transmission grid. Out of those customers, there are also many thinking about leaving the gas from their sites, but this process is a process of thinking if it makes sense economically also. And with the prices currently as we see, and with the delivery times of equipment as we have right now, that becomes a lot of debate about it. So that progress is not as fast as it could be, but we expect in the long run that this will happen. So our main message here is that we are ready here to support transition, to support the connections. We do what we can in terms of availability of the capacity, and being supportive towards the clients and customers to get the connection requests up and running.
Mm-hmm. And how can you get more support from the European Union to do this? Do you believe there's more that Europe can do there?
That I think is that what we face right now as the biggest problem is that these permitting processes are taking way too long. As we heard, it's one of the initiatives of the European Union to speed things up. And the other thing is the availability and affordability of the equipment, which, okay, is the situation as we see today. Somehow we have to deal with that. But it would be one thing that I could wish for is that would be the permitting processes should be smoother.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so regulations here can help improve things. Peter Vermaat, the EU DSO entity is still a young organization. There has been a lot of focus in recent years on DSOs. There's a lot of pressure. I think also in your country, the Netherlands, there's been bottlenecks in terms of the connection requests. So how are you approaching this kind of new world? And do you believe we are now really entering a new world that this energy crisis has brought us into?
Yes, indeed, the pressure is high on the DSOs. DSO entity as an institutional organization is indeed relatively young. We started 4 years ago, in fact on the same mandate as NSOE to prepare technical guidelines and regulatory advisories to the European Commission and to ACER. So we work a lot together also between TSOs and DSOs, and especially here in ALS, we have a very specific example of a DSO and TSO in one go. But going to your question, indeed, and it was also illustrated by the Secretary of State, is that after a couple of years focusing on generation and TSOs, I think the marker of the increased awareness of the relevance of DSOs, in fact, was the Grid Action Plan from the European Commission. In various countries, you could have seen the awareness already increasing, but I think the European-wide view came a little bit with the Grid Action Plan, obviously also related to the very bad reason of the energy crisis from the war. And I think what we have seen is that creating that awareness helps a lot to also see what are priorities. And I think we'll discuss some of the priorities later, but I think that the starting point is quite similar for DSOs and TSOs, like increased investment, permitting, supply chain. However, it's also important to see that DSOs are much more diverse and much more decentralized than TSOs, so we need to fine-tune all instruments, all policies to accommodate that. So to illustrate, we represent 800 DSOs from very small to very large, connecting 255 million consumers in all member states, in all varieties that it brings. So that is one of the challenges, to manage diversity.
Yes, it's a very scattered landscape. Ivan Bulatović, turning to you now, how has the situation changed in Montenegro with the energy crisis? How has Montenegro been affected by this? Which areas, have you tried pushing to address this, and what areas do you believe there's still progress to be made?
Thank you for this very interesting question, and thank you for invitation for this specific conference. For Montenegro is, as you know, we are still in WB6 countries, so it's a little bit different than the EU countries. So we need even more, effort to reach the EU stage. So we think that we are on good path, and we are looking forward to join you in 2028 or 2029. But in energy part of when we are talking about energy part, we are of course connected with all the EU countries, and of course with our transmission lines and interconnections, we are part of the Europe, I will say like that. But anyhow, about the crisis, crisis by itself take a lot of measures we take a lot of measures how to intervene with this crisis, because it was really hard to achieve the balance between the prices for domestic households and of course import energy for the I would say for the maximum price, and it was a very difficult. What we conclude, it was very simple, how to say, that we have to be energy independence in the manner of the import. So we think that we have to increase the number of the renewable sources which will be connected to the network, and we do it like this. Especially we increase the number of prosumers, which is very important with our project, which is so-called 5,000 plus with smart grid. We put the panels, let's say photovoltaic panels to the grid all over 7,000 households, which is when you have how small Montenegro is like a country, it's a very big amount. It's 70 or 80 megawatts, which we installed in domestic households. It's 10% of our portfolio of production, so it is a big amount of prosumers, and that let's say somehow show us that this was the good choice. And from another point of view, we of course in Montenegro, as you know, maybe we have a really huge interest for renewables, especially in solar. We have 5,000 megawatts already issued urbanistic technical plans for such a kind of renewables, but of course the network is not ready for penetration of all these renewables, and in this manner we have to of course develop our network as soon as possible to connect as we can these renewables. What is also the problem that we also depending from the coal. You know that 40% of our production is still from coal. So we are in phase of ecological reconstruction for our thermal power plant level. So it is shut down for 8 months. But that also shows us that we are in big trouble because of the import of electricity in such a kind of let's say average price of 100 euro. Average price, I'm talking now about average price. But anyhow, it is a big loss for power utility company like is EPCG. So anyhow, I think that energy independence, energy crisis show us that we have to be energy independent. That means that we have to, as much as we can, try to, let's say, have a benefit from these renewables, and of course wind, solar, and also that we have some kind of stable source that can, how to say, balance all this energy from renewables.
Okay, yeah, so a big push for renewables, still some progress to be made on grids. That's a good segue into my next question, which is about renewables, and I'll turning to you, Tina Seršen. We are in the European Union, apparently, according to the European Commission, on track to reaching our 2030 targets for energy, including on renewables. There's a new package of legislation coming up, probably next year, with, I presume, even higher targets. Do you believe the grids will be able to cope with higher targets than the ones we have currently? It's 42.5% that we have now in the legislation for 2030. Can we go even higher without putting too much strain on the grid?
Actually, I do, but it comes with the necessity to install or upgrade not just grid, but also storage. So I think we can go higher. We have countries proving us that it's possible, and the system still works. So I think the overall European Union can go beyond the current target that was set, I think, last year. However, if we will neglect the necessity to invest in storage, in flexibility, in grids internally, not just cross-border, then we will have problems. So I'm hoping that the European Commission sees that, because that's, for example, like the story now in Slovenia is that with such a high penetration of photovoltaics in the last 2 years, we are now really facing challenges when there's overproduction, and we are now putting in place mechanisms to stimulate additional storage to be put on grid, and of course pushing forward investments in the grid itself. I think that was the perspective that was perhaps not so highlighted in the last years in the European Union, or at least it wasn't so visible. We are now discovering the need to change the guidelines for state aid, and I hope that's coming as well. I hope that the Commission is having this in mind, because the current state aid guidelines that are now in place are not really suitable for high storage penetration solutions.
Specifically for electricity,
Yeah, electricity, sorry.
Yeah. And there's a grids package which is being prepared at the European Commission. What would be your key priorities for this?
Well, I can only speak for my country. I hope that's understandable. I'm not having the European perspective as much as some of the colleagues here at the same table, but for Slovenia, absolutely grid flexibility, storage integration. I think our TSO has invested so much, has learned so much from its past projects, that it can offer valuable insights to this process as well. So that would be for the and of course money has to follow as well. I know that DG Energies will only be focusing on legislation and regulatory framework, but we know that currently there are negotiations started on the next multi-annual financial framework, and that has to also reflect the priorities that the European Union has on energy. It has to. Without it, we will not manage solely by legislative.
Is Slovakia ready, like Slovenia, to go even higher than 42.5%, or do you believe some major upgrades will be necessary?
Well, so we expect that the amount of renewables which will make requests to connect to the network is going to grow, definitely. The question is, how is the grid prepared? Well, I believe that we need to invest into the grid to accommodate more of the renewables. We have a process or programs ongoing which should allow for higher capacity, but it's not only to upgrade the grids physically. It's about to see what is already available in the grids, to utilize the existing capacity of the grids, not necessarily to build equipment and grids all over the country just to transfer the electricity from one place to another. It makes really no sense. So I think that we need to see this from both sides. Also, what I believe is that the regulatory framework should allow, because that as a TSO we always have the feeling we come behind the investments for renewables or any other type of power generation, for example. So to reduce the time for connection, we already know that it's going to happen. We would really like the regulatory framework to allow for anticipatory investments. That's not the case right now, but we really hope that it's going to happen one day, and that should really help us to invest more into the networks, to be ready earlier than we are, possibly are today.
Okay, and in terms of the priorities that you would have for the grids package, which is currently in preparation, what would that be?
Well, I mean, again, the expectations are high, obviously, but let's see what the reality is going to be. We need to take into account the possibilities. So from our point of view, I believe that a lot of regulation which we have right now is stopping the companies from going, from changing the transition of the energy. And again, to support these anticipatory investments would be something that we would appreciate.
Thank you. Peter Vermaat, so from the DSO perspective, we've seen all these renewables coming online, causing sometimes bottlenecks in terms of the connections. What is needed beyond 2030 if we want to go even higher than the current targets that we have on renewables?
Yeah, indeed you see penetration going very high. It also illustrates, I think, that DSOs are in action. Yeah, I hear a little bit of an echo. But what I wanted to say is that DSOs are really in action mode. And to illustrate that, for instance, not everybody might realize that if you look at the increase in offshore wind in 2024, it was like 1.4 gigawatts, which is massive. However, the total increase in renewables for rooftop solar only in Europe was 38 gigawatts. So there's 20 times more, all distributed about the DSO grid. So that is very interesting to see that even 1.4 gigawatts on offshore, which is very visible, but if you look around, 38 gigawatts rooftop is really showing the action mode. Now, what do we need for that? And I think that is illustrated also by some of the previous speakers. DSOs always try to utilize the grid to the maximum efficiency. And beyond that, we need to invest. We need to invest in smartening the grid and simply also in expanding the grid. Because electrification, which is an important vector to go, will also increase electricity demand. So simply capacity needs to be enlarged. And I think that if you then look to the anticipated grid package, that the EU level could help to shape conditions such that DSOs can do their job in a way, in close interaction with the TSOs, obviously. But if you look at it, I think there are sort of 5 areas that we need to cover, and I will briefly go into them, and then if there is more time I can go into details. But I think the starting point is to just go on with implementing what we agreed already on many topics like digitization and flexibilization and other things. But in addition to that, it's important that we create a forward-looking regulation system, including the anticipatory investments that were already mentioned, so that we turn our system from looking back and basing ourselves on the history, looking forward and anticipate growth in investments in a good allocation of cost and tariffs. And thirdly, better access to funding is important, not only like innovation projects or common interest projects like PCIs, but also the more structural access to both public and private funding for all DSOs, from very small to very large. Number 4, it is about related conditions on supply chain and permitting. I think the Grid Action Plan was a very good stimuli for that already. And number 5 is to have the system approach together, TSO, DSO, and even wider. You were referring to electrons and molecules. As you might know, perhaps one of the challenges for DSO entity is to integrate the gas DSOs to truly have an integrated approach. So I think we need to manage that together as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Ivan Bulatović, turning to you with the same question on renewables. Do you think a country like Montenegro is ready to go beyond what is currently in the 2030 targets at the EU level in terms of renewables, or do you see big changes that are necessary to adapt the grid to this?
Thank you. I will answer very simply, because I think that I mentioned what is the number of the request for connection to the grid. If we succeed to connect them to the grid, so it will be more than enough, in my point of view, for a small country like Montenegro. So also what is the scope, let's say, of the whole Europe is, of course, to we can hear from all the participants that all the countries are in the same mode. Let's say they push the renewables as much as we can, even on the edge of the transmission and the distribution system. Also in Montenegro, we are like EPCG, we are the owner of the DSO, so we also have a lot of requests for a DSO connection. So anyhow, I think that we have two, let's say, I will mention that two cases, especially in the Balkan region, that we have a problem with all these renewables during the connection of the renewables during the summertime. It was how to say a lot of cases that bring to this blackout. We have two blackouts, one 3 years ago, one in Spain, in Portugal. So we think that this could happen even more in the future, because we are let's say putting as much as we can. I will again say that we put renewables on the top of the priority, and the connection of the renewables, and of course the grids are not ready for such a kind of number of the renewables. Of course, interconnection lines. You know that we need for one interconnection line. Due to the landowners issue, and everybody faced with this, that we need 5-7 years to build a new interconnection line, and the new let's say power plant, especially solar power plant, can be built for, let's say, two or 3 years. So in this I can see that this is the problem, that grids cannot follow all the requests for connections. And it's the same story in Montenegro. I think that whole Europe has faced with this problem, but anyhow, we have to have, of course, better planning. That, of course, NSOE is doing a 10 development plan, 10 years development plan. Also, all the stakeholders and all the TSOs, all the DSOs, that the better planning. Even I think that is very hard to plan all these renewables, but anyhow, that better planning could be one of the, how to say, can solve some problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will open the floor to questions in a moment, so please be ready and raise your hands. But before I do that, let me just throw a question, and I'll start with you, Ivan Bulatović, about the suppliers of electrical gear, because we know budgets are tight, a lot of investments need to be made. There's probably an attraction to go for the cheapest suppliers. Have you turned in Montenegro, for example, to Chinese suppliers of electrical gear, or is that something that you've been staying away from because of concerns related to cybersecurity, for instance?
Good question. We are open also in Montenegro. We are still open for Chinese suppliers because our procurement law is, let's say, something which is regulated, and we are obliged, like a governmental company, we are obliged to follow this procurement law. This procurement law is not forbidden for Chinese supplier. That means that the cheapest, if of course all the technical requirements are fulfilled, then of course cheapest one is winning the tender. So we cannot fight. I think that this battle is have been already lost in some years ago. So all the equipment is for energy sector is they are produced in China, or they can assemble somewhere else in Europe also, but all the main components are now that they are producing in China. So with this procurement law, and of course we have several tenders procedure with KfW, with EBRD. Also, EBRD cannot stop the, let's say, Chinese companies to follow the bid to be bidders. So it's not. Even though EBRD or KfW cannot stop the Chinese companies to access the tender.
Okay, Peter Vermaat, I see you wanted to react to this.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan, indeed, for illustrating the case for purchasing and the supply of equipment. And if I take a little bit wider view, also referring to your connection to cybersecurity, I think indeed it's relevant to look into the supply like China or other countries. But if you step back a little further, if you imagine how many millions of inverters connect rooftop solar, or how many millions of cars are connected to the DSO grid, imagine that all, well, I don't name any specific brand of a car, but imagine that any group of electric vehicles is switched on or off through a computer hack at one moment. That goes a little bit beyond the original supplier only. And for that, I like to refer also to the network code for cybersecurity that was prepared between NSOE and DSO entity a little while ago, which is now putting into operation. So let's keep an eye on that as well. It's about the supplier, but it's also about what is happening in the grid. And the more the penetration of any device goes, especially into the DSO grid, the more vulnerable we get. So it's urgent to work on that.
And do you believe the EU should put safeguards in place, for example?
Yeah, I think we're working.
Chinese supplies?
Yeah, so we are working on various safeguards also through the layers of the network code, but also in preparing specifications for suppliers. That is not only for Chinese equipment, right? It's going beyond any of the suppliers as such to make sure that we know what we are doing.
Tina Seršen, turning to you about the suppliers' questions of cyber security, you know, and equipment coming from China. How has Slovenia dealt with this?
Actually, I just want to comment on this. I mean, I also very much agree that we should keep an eye on this and do something about it. But what I would want to stress is that there's the political dimension to this question, and there's the expert, the engineering dimension of this question. And the political dimension is very easy, I think. As we, you know, the European consumer is very sensitive about the products that it consumes. For example, the food chain or mobile phones is a similar case that you can throw parallels to. We have safeguards on our borders preventing the food that we consume coming from outside, that it's not, you know, treated with illegal I can't remember, chemicals and things like that. So it's from the political dimension, it's a natural development that we are, of course, implement safeguards also on other products, electronic equipment and things like that we import from China. But on the other hand, there's the engineering dimension. Can our engineers, do we have the knowledge? Are our engineers able to develop standards that will answer to that? Do we have the knowledge? Are we working on that? You know, can we deliver on that one? And that is something that the politics cannot answer. I mean, it has to come from the experts.
And how has Slovenia, have you put safeguards in place against some of the suppliers?
You ask me too much, because that's something that is connected to the international trade, which is not my field of expertise. Okay. I will follow up on that and ask my colleague and trade minister. But I'm sure that our TSO is sensitive on this issue when it comes to public procurement. Yeah. It's something that perhaps has to be directed. Question has to be directed on that. Okay, yeah. But as a country, we do not have the competence to introduce our national import safeguards. Yeah. It's a European trade space. So,
Martin Magáth, from Slovakia's perspective, how have you been dealing with suppliers in China?
Well, we have not. But again, I mean, for me, it's not a question of whether this is a Chinese supplier or an Indian supplier. What we have to do, or we have to keep in mind, is still the vast majority of the equipment which we use in our network is still produced in the EU. Okay, perhaps some of the small things produced in China, but they make no difference again. But the strategic things still produced. What we see here, and we did an analysis, the delivery times jumped from, 2-3 years to 5-6 years. The cost of the equipment compared with the pre-war area, they jumped up by 70%. And that, I think, is the point which needs to be worked on, and then we have no issues with China or Indian equipment. We need to support European producers and manufacturers to give them, means to lower the costs. Don't, harass them with, unnecessary regulations. Just to, be like an entrepreneur, cost-effective, and optimize the production. I think this would help a lot. and then we have no issues with China.
Right.
Again, Chinese didn't invent anything better than we did, and I think we can do better than them still.
All right, so on an EU level, you say keep the borders open, don't close to Chinese.
Sure, I mean, it's
suppliers.
also important that still the European manufacturers feel the pressure of the competitiveness, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise they will, again, continue with the trend as we see today.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that fortunately we've just run out of time and there won't be any space for questions from the audience. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us today. Join me for a round of applause.
It was an excellent roundtable. Thank you so much, Frédéric. I guess Frédéric asked the questions that we wanted to ask as well, so give him a big round of applause as well. Thank you to the panelists. Wish you a lovely day further on. I'd just like to say that the great majority of panelists are staying with us through the rest of the day, so you can always approach them and ask questions if you have any. So just to have that in mind, that everybody's happy to talk with you if you have any further questions.